Good afternoon. My name is Buffy. I'm a women's lifestyle creator on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, covering topics on women's lifestyle as well as I have two podcasts. One is Recovering Perfectionist Mama, which is a psychology channel, which is housed on YouTube. And the other one is a Grace and Gavel true crime podcast, also housed on YouTube. I'm an almost 18-year criminal defense attorney. So let's get started today. So today we are talking about the moment you realize it was never about you. There is a moment, and if you've lived it, you know, where something clicks and you realize this was never about me, right? You were a person who learned from an early age that you needed to keep the peace, to keep people comfortable, to keep people peaceful and manage conflict. And you felt like it was your job to do that. So the way that you often did that was you ended up taking care of people. You ended up taking heavy emotional loads that weren't yours. You ended up essentially doing what you thought needed to be done to manage conflict and keep everyone happy and safe and emotionally grounded. And so if that's you, you're likely still living that to this day, and you oftentimes take on things that have nothing to do with you, which can be extremely difficult, can be extremely frustrating. And so then ultimately you realize this was never about me, right? Not your tone, not your words, not how many times you explained yourself. And just know that over-explaining and overthinking have its roots in childhood. Maybe you were constantly questioned. Maybe you felt like you had to justify every single response that you gave. If you did, this is likely the roots of over-explaining, where you think, even though you've seen it doesn't really do a lot of difference when you over-explain, because people are still going to misunderstand you if they want to misunderstand you. But it's the people who ask questions, it's the people who lean in, it's the people who genuinely are listening to what you have to say, rather than just zoning out and not paying attention, right? And so it was never about you. And that's not a negative thing to say about somebody. That's a reassurance way of it's not always about you. Hello, Darius. Hello, Darius. Welcome. My name is Buffy. Nice to see you. Nice to meet you. So today we're talking about the moment you realize it was never about you. And ultimately, I used to be a person who, if there was someone upset at a restaurant or something, I assumed it was about me, right? And so I would constantly take on things that didn't belong to me, not because I like to take on extra things, but because I felt like it was my duty. Because in growing up, that's what I did as well. I would apologize for things that I didn't do. I still over apologize. Things that you think they have their root in childhood. And then you also think about over-explaining. You want to be understood. And generally, over-explaining is a symptom of somebody who has constantly been over-questioned, a person who's constantly been grilled, worried that they're not getting the right answer, worried that something is just wrong and they have to fix it with their words. Unfortunately, a lot of people look at people who over-explain like they're trying to hide something. They're trying to convince someone. They're trying to... But ultimately, I think it comes from a need for connection and common ground and making friends and working through things, right? Explaining where you're coming from so people understand you, especially if you've been a person who's been misunderstood, you feel like a lot of your life. That is why over-explaining is so difficult. And so then you start going into the idea of maybe I said it wrong. Maybe I didn't say it the way that I wanted to say it, and it sounded a different way than what I intended it to be. Or maybe I need to explain it better. I didn't tell them all the things that I really wanted to tell them, but somehow like it got lost. It got lost in translation, and they're likely not understanding where I'm coming from. Or maybe if I just show them my heart. But how do you show someone your heart when you're first meeting them? Oftentimes those things take time. And a lot of people feel like they can show their heart immediately, but ultimately you can't, because it's a pattern. It's a buildup. It's a relationship that has to grow slowly and steadily to actually show who someone actually is, right? And so you can't just all of a sudden say, hey, here's my heart. No, it is a pattern thing. It is a recognition thing that builds over time, right? So you try harder, you soften, you over-explain, you literally carry emotional weight that's not yours. So guys, if you're getting some value out of this, feel free to just give us a like. I'd appreciate it. But the outcome never changes. And that's your clue. The outcome never changes, then what you're doing is futile. What you're doing may be having the opposite effect, right? So when the outcome doesn't change, no matter how clearly, kindly, or calmly you show up, you are not in a misunderstanding. You are in a fixed narrative. And the person sitting across from you has already made up their mind. They've already decided what they want to do and how they want to do it, right? They've already decided who you are, right? Well, I think this person is this. What role you're going to play. Are you going to be the peacemaker? Are you going to be the person that over-explains? How your words will be interpreted. And once it happens, you're not being heard, you're being filtered through their lens, right? So this is oftentimes where people get stuck and feel hopeless and like nothing they do is going to change anything, because it's not about you. It's about the person that you're communicating with or trying to communicate with. Are they open to listening what you have to say, or have they already made up their mind? Then you have to grieve something larger, right? The relationship you thought maybe you had or that you were building, the fairness that you thought you would get and you thought that you deserved and you thought maybe existed, and the idea that the truth would be enough, right? So the closer here, and then I'm going to go to another live after this, is freedom doesn't come from explaining better. It comes from realizing I don't need to prove myself in a story that I didn't write. This is not the story that you wrote. This is a narrative written by someone else, and you don't know what they put in their story. I don't need to prove myself inside a story I didn't write. So if this hits you, stay with me, because the next step after this realization, I'm going into this is where most people either break or finally get free. And that is why explaining yourself makes it worse and what to do instead, okay? If you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, how did that get so twisted? This is why. And more importantly, this is why explaining yourself is actually making it worse. When someone has already decided who you are, every explanation you give becomes defensive, too much, proof you're guilty. So what do? A lot of us would explain more. We would double down on our strategy and start explaining more. Well, first of all, I'm not being defensive. I'm just giving you an idea of who I am. I'm not too much. I'm not trying to be too much. I mean, I apologize if I'm like too much for you, but I just really want to explain my viewpoint, and I just want us to potentially connect if that's possible, or proof you're guilty. I'm not guilty of anything. I just want to have an actual real conversation with you. If that's too much pressure for you, I understand, but I'm a person who likes to connect with others. And so what do? You explain more, you clarify, you try to fix the distortion. But ultimately, people are not going to do anything unless they want to do it. It's in their if the ball is in their court, they're going to decide whether or not they feel like you're worth listening to, or they just want to like go away and be left alone. Some people just don't want to connect for whatever reason. And I think that is a big human need for us all to connect and get to know each other and to have a meeting of the minds, so to speak, right? And so ultimately, no one should be afraid if you're clarifying, if you're explaining, if you're trying to fix a distortion. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever, right? And so let's talk about the hard truth here. But here's what's actually happening. You're trying to use logic inside an emotional system that already rejected you. And logic doesn't land here. Let's talk about the breakdown. Explaining yourself only works when the other person is open. So they have to be able to be open, listening, communicating, and going through this. Excuse me. And wanting to know more. The goal is understanding. If they are trying to understand you, then that's when explaining works and a shared reality. But when those aren't present, explaining turns into fuel. It turns into ammunition. It turns into confirmation bias, meaning you are confirming every single thing that they thought already, because they're going to say that it confirms what they're thinking. So this is why I say, if the outcome doesn't change, the conversation isn't real. You're not resolving anything. You're participating in a script written by someone else, and you don't know what your role is. You don't know what they're thinking. You have no idea what they're, where their mind is, if they're looking for a connection or they're looking for obstruction or to potentially defensiveness on their part. So that's the problem. And I guess you could ask them, but are they going to be honest about it or not? I mean, that's another question to ask as well. So what to do instead? Don't be louder. You're not worrying about being louder. You're not worrying about being clearer. And don't be more emotional, because more emotional then makes them kind of go back into their hole a little bit. So less ultimately is best. So shorter responses, don't over explain. You've already likely done what you can. Maybe some of it stuck, maybe some of it didn't. And let silence expose the pattern. But here's the truth. When you stop over explaining, the dynamic becomes visible. So in closing in this, they already decided who you are, what role you play, and how your words will be interpreted. And once that happens, you're not being heard, you're being filtered, right? And this is where people get stuck, because it's not about you, right? And ultimately, freedom doesn't come from explaining better. It comes from realizing I don't need to prove myself inside a story I didn't write. If this hit you, then you totally understand, right? You don't win by being understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. And a lot of people would rather misunderstand someone than try to make a real actual connection. So call to action. If you've been stuck in the let me explain one more time loop, this is your permission to stop today, right now. Get your freedom back, right? You deserve that much. So if you got some value in this, feel free to like and subscribe. And I just want to say thank you all for tuning in, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. I do tend to come back here at 12:30 p.m. Eastern pretty much every day of the week. So feel free to check us out again if you will. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.